Are you one of those kids that watched the movie instead of read the book in high school? Well, then you should actually this time read To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. And before we get to the review, we're going to answer one question. Did I enjoy reading the book? And the answer is yes. Welcome to Whiskey and Literature, where we read and discuss the greatest books of all time. And while we're turning those pages, we're sipping those bottles, those finely distilled spirits. I'm your host, Captain Mike, and I'm reading and reviewing 52 books in 52 weeks in 2023. And this is my 19th book review of the year so far, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. And before we get to the review, let's talk about the author, Harper Lee, one of the greatest one-shot wonders of all time. She was born in 1926 and passed away in her sleep in 2016. She won the Pulitzer Prize for To Kill a Mockingbird, or the book itself won the Pulitzer Prize, and she won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And Harper Lee, like a lot of the books and authors that I've read this year so far, she based a lot of the people, places, and events on experiences she had in her childhood. And before we get to the book, brief mention of the whiskey of the week. This is the classic, Jack Daniel's Old No. 7. I'll be reviewing this whiskey this week. Look forward to drop, and the link will be in the description below. Okay, let's talk about the specs and stats for To Kill a Mockingbird. This book was an instant success when it was first published in 1960. It has never been out of print since it was originally published, has sold over 30 million copies, and has been a high school staple read for a very long time. I listened to this book mostly on Audible. I did read the last 5 or 6 chapters. This was read by Sissy Spacek, 12 hours, 17 minutes, and she did a fantastic job. I like Sissy Spacek. We also listened to her read Carrie by Stephen King. My paper copy, we already owned it. I didn't have to buy it because some of the little captains read this in high school, and it's 323 pages long. And this is one of the books that I assumed that I had read, but when I was turning these pages, I realized I had never read To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, let's talk about the plot and structure and some of the characters. I think most Americans have read this book or watched the movie. At least they're familiar with this story. In fact, Mrs. Captain and I just went to the movie theater yesterday, and they were playing this movie at the theater as one of the classics. We didn't watch it, but I think that was great that they were doing that. Okay, we are introduced to Jim and Scout Finch, who live with their father, Atticus, and the black cook, maid, caregiver, Calpurnia, in the fictional town of Macomb, Macomb, Alabama, in the early 1930s. Their mother had passed away when Scout was very young. The children befriend a neighbor boy named Dill, and he comes out to Macomb for the summers and spends them there, and they spend all their summers raising hell with the neighbors and trying to coax their neighbor Boo Radley from his home. And this story is told from Scout's viewpoint. Their father Atticus, he's an attorney, and he's appointed by the local judge to represent a black man who is accused of raping a white woman. Atticus simultaneously tries to defend Tom Robinson to the best of his ability while raising and preparing his children for the scorn and derision that they're going to get from their neighbors and other townsfolk because their father is defending a black man. We hardly hear about the trial in the first half of the book. It's all about Southern life, relationship, and growing up. In the second half of the book, we continue the theme of growing up and growing pains. And there are some interactions with the townsfolk about the trial itself, and the aftermath of the trial. Major themes in this book are Southern life, gender roles, racial injustice, parenting, and the loss of innocence. Okay, my thoughts on To Kill a Mockingbird. And I can understand why some people judge this book to be simplistic and stereotypical. I think that the most interesting books are when the characters are shades of good and bad and experience growth. And for the most part, in To Kill a Mockingbird, the characters are what they are and remain so. Jim and Scout are really the only characters in this book who change and grow. However, it really works, and I freaking love this book. I literally was in tears after going for a walk and listening to the story and coming inside my house, was crying at the jury's verdict and Jim's incomprehension. You cannot read this book without thinking that Scout is one of the greatest little girl characters in any story ever written, except maybe Jane Eyre. I'm still kind of in love with her. Jim and Dill also are fantastic, and Atticus is the dad that you wish you had. All the supporting characters, they're brought to life and really flesh out the entire story. I was never bored with this read, always excited to see what came next, and I, again, can't believe that I have never read this book. I was talking to my mom last week, and she said I told her I was reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and she says she's read it at least 25 times in her life. And we have another guest reviewer coming up for a different book later in the year, Miss Laurie, and she said this also is one of her favorite books of all time. And now it's one of my favorite books of all time. Okay, so while this book is read in high school, it has been banned in some locations due to the language in the story and the discussion of rape. So if you have a young one read this book, be prepared to discuss some sensitive topics. And if you have not read this book, what are you waiting for? Get it. Okay guys, star rating. And I judge all the books on 5 criteria, 6 if I listen to it on Audible, and I did this one. So let's go through it. Initial response. How do I feel as soon as I finish this book? And I'm going to give it a 5 because I felt great. Recommendation. How likely am I to recommend this book? And I'm going to give it a 4 just because it's not appropriate for everybody. And style. Did I enjoy the writing style? I'm going to give it a 4 because I enjoyed it. It was linear and easy to read. Plot and structure. How engaged was I in the story? And this one gets a 5 because I was super excited to turn every one of those pages and see what was coming up next. Characters. Were they relatable, believable, engaging? And I'm only going to give it a 3 because while I love Scout and Jim and some of the characters, I feel like some of them were very simple, didn't experience any growth, and they were more caricatures of stereotypes of that era. So, and I did listen to it on Audible, like I said. CC Spacek did a nice job reading that, so this gets a 4. And okay, that's 25. So 25 divided by 6 is 4.16 stars. So 4.16 stars for To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. All right, guys, thanks for sticking with me. In the description below are the links to my other reviews. If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe to see more of my content. I hope you are reading something good and drinking something great. Turn those pages, my friends, and stay thirsty. Cheers.